Just wanted to make a quick video on how my wife and I are doing our cable railing on our deck. We looked at some videos that some other people have done, and a lot of people had fastened some kind of screwed hardware on the outside edge of the post and tied their cable to it and then strung it around the deck. We decided we didn't want to have any hardware showing, so what I did here is I took a 1-inch Forstner bit and I bored a hole about 3/4 of the way through my post, and then went to the hardware store and bought an elevator bolt. They're just basically a bolt with a flat head on them. They don't have an actual X head on them. And then I just drilled a hole in it, just slightly larger than our 1/8-inch cable. And then I took a washer. I made sure the elevator bolt head was larger than my bored hole, and I took a washer that was a 1-inch diameter washer, and I just hot glued it in place to keep the bolt from walking around in the hole. So once it's in the hole, it's set still, it won't move up or down or around and expose the hole. It works really well. Basically all you have to do is, once the bolt's in, before you go too far, you want to make sure you have your hole drilled all the way through for your cable. So once I bored my hole through on this side, I just went ahead and made a hole slightly larger than my cable. I drilled it on through so the cable could protrude out the other side of the post with a nice clean hole. Sorry if this video is going to be real shaky. So once you have the cable, hold on real quick, have my wife hold the camera for me. And you could do this with a lag bolt too, or I'm sorry, a carriage bolt, if you wanted it to look a little different. But basically you got your cable, and I made my hole in my bolt just barely larger than my cable because I want it to be kind of a tight fit. So once it's on this edge, or once you're through the bolt, you don't have to put any kind of fastener on it if you don't want to, because once you bend this over, it cannot pull back through once it's pushing the hole. Just friction won't allow it. So I just leave it just enough to get it in the hole there, and then I just push the excess cable into the hole like so, and the washer keeps it from walking, and you just pull it tight and then you're set. It won't come out. And then if you look over here, I can pull on this cable as hard as I can and it won't move because of the friction in the bolt there. So once you're to that point, you can just thread your cable on the rest of the way through here, kind of like so, like we're doing. And we've just drilled holes through all the posts. I made a template on a piece of plywood so all my holes are in the same spot. And then all we did here at the end, where we're tying back in, we just did some actual, they're just called I don't know what they're called. They're just basically an 1/8-inch cable crimping, aluminum cable crimper, and we just crimp them onto the end of the cable after we make our loop, and then we just use some aluminum turnbuckles and tighten them up here. And all we have here are just some bolts running through the post. It turned out really well. It's working pretty good. Saves us a lot of money too, so hopefully that's something you can do and work out for you. Okay, so the bolts we use, I thought I'd get into a little more detail here. The bolts we use are just an eyelet bolt. You can get these in stainless steel. You know, you can get them zinc coated. We just went ahead and got the zinc coated, and we're trying to go cheap, so these are only like $1 a piece. They're basically just a bolt with a nut on the end that's long enough to fit through the 4x4 here. So now that we're to this point, I'm on my last cable. I got my turnbuckle in place. I have it extended. What I do is I extend it to its maximum length, and I thread it back in a couple of turns, so you don't have, you don't lose your threads when you're trying to tighten back up. Just to make sure there's enough thread inside so it doesn't strip it out later. So then basically now, got my cable here, and we're trying to see that we got enough, so I got plenty. What I'm going to do is just go ahead and cut myself off enough here to work with. I found that these fencing pliers, I've had them for a while from doing barbed wire fence back a long time ago. They cut it pretty well. If you buy a specialty tool for cutting cable, it's about $60. That's for a cheap one. These fencing tools work pretty well because they're a pretty nice cut-off area inside of them. It'll cut it, not all the way through, but almost, and I usually finish it off with a pair of side cutters. So I got my length here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut. And it usually leaves a couple of strands there. What I'll do is take my side cutters and just cut those last couple of strands. Like so. And now I have my cable crimper. They're just an aluminum crimper. They're cheap. It's like $1.50 for a pack of 5 at our hardware store. And basically you take, it's got, I don't know if you can see that in the video, it's got 2 sides. So you're going to slip your cable through one side, like so. And I'm going to loop it back to itself through the other side. And the reason we did these instead of the cable clamps that actually have a nut and bolt on them, we just thought this was a little cleaner look. Just kind of more simple. And so now that I got my crimper on there, I'm going to just kind of pull the slack out of the cable. And I'm just going to hold it tight with one hand. And I'm going to slide this crimper up not as tight as you can, but pretty close. I'm trying to keep them mostly even. Some of them are a little off, but I've tried to do my best to keep them as even as I can. And then to crimp these, all you need is a pair of bolt cutters. They don't need to be this large, but they work pretty well for crimping this. And all you got to do is basically put your bolt cutters on the actual aluminum crimper and just crimp down on it. You don't want to cut all the way through it, but just crimp down enough where it's kind of tight on that cable. And I usually do 2 of them just to make sure it holds. Kind of hard to do here with another set of hands, but if you see, it crimps down on that cable. And usually what I do, since the bolt cutters are kind of cutting at a V, or they're crimping at a V, you don't really get a good crimp on the other side of the cable. So I usually flip it over and just kind of crimp from the other side just to be safe. I don't know if that's necessary, but I like to do that. So you can see now, this is all crimped and it doesn't move. The cable's pretty floppy, but this turnbuckle has, I think, 2 inches of play in it, so it doesn't take much if I start tightening it up. And that's about half of my travel, and that cable's already nice and tight. I'm leaving them loose at the moment because we're gonna put some rail base between. I don't want to pull my post over yet, so I have a little extra here, and I'll just use my fencing tool to cut that excess off, and then it'll be done. It's that easy.